Hey everyone, DJ here. Welcome back to the show. As a kid, I was always quite fascinated with the various Thomas and Friends locations and characters that never made it from the books to the screen. You know, things like the Caldy Fell Railway, D199, Big City Engine, etc. And this was probably because a lot of the characters especially had merchandise released in the major Thomas toy lines, predominantly die-cast and wooden, which of course meant that as a kid I owned characters that I never saw in Thomas and Friends media, except for the odd sticker book here and there. The one Railway series exclusive thing that fascinated me the most, however, was definitely the Arlesdale Railway. Made very much the case thanks to the 2002 Take-Along Mike. Side note, the merch lines had an obsession with Mike for some reason. He has 2 wooden railway releases, 2 arguably 3 die-cast releases, and a motorized release too. Yowza. Anywho, my fascination with the miniature railway grew to new heights with Sodor's Legend of the Lost Treasure, bringing the railway and its first 3 engines to the screen for the first time. And as I got older and began to do more research into the Railway series and Thomas lore, I of course discovered Chris Audrey's book featuring the Arlesdale Railway, Jock the New Engine. And having covered another New Engine book last time with New Little Engine in the Ivo Hugh video, I thought it fitting to discuss what I feel to be the far superior attempt at the New Engine is Introduced book, and the titular New Engine himself, Jock. So, let's get into it. Jock is a 15-inch gauge miniature locomotive built for the Arlesdale Railway in 1976. By 1975, at which point his construction began, the Arlesdale Railway was experiencing hiccups in operations, albeit some several years apart. From Rex leaking steam in 1967 to Bert's tubes making him feel unwell in 1975, the need for a new engine was indeed recognized by Mr. Fergus Duncan relatively early, as by 1972, Jock's construction had begun. The Railway series' official description lays out that Jock was constructed in Arlesborough to the designs of Ivan Ferrier, the work's chief engineer, who worked in close consultation with Ian Smith, chief engineer of the Ravenglass and Eskdale Railway, which also needed and was building a new locomotive, hence the similarities between Jock and Northern Rock. Jock was also built with the best qualities of Mike, Rex, and Bert in his design, which in my opinion is probably what makes him such an efficient engine. Jock rolled out of the works in 1976 and was given his name by Douglas. Jock's yellow undercoat reminded Douglas of engines from the Highlands, who wore the same color and were called Jocks. Jock and the small controller both liked the name, so Jock and the yellow undercoat stuck. Jock soon proved a reliable and useful engine, at one point pulling a lorry trailer through the yard when the lorry itself couldn't get in. Jock became rather cocky, unfortunately, especially thanks to his popularity with tourists. This caused some shenanigans between him and Mike, as Jock was asked to double-head Mike's train so the tourists could see him, and teased Mike about it, leading to Mike getting upset, shutting off steam secretly, and leaving Jock to pull the full train. Mike's injector failed on the way back, however, leaving Jock to pull the full train on his own. The 2 engines apologized and made up. Jock, having learned his lesson, became a less cocky engine. Jock is undoubtedly the strongest engine on the Arlesdale, and he of course became a much nicer and sensible engine as time went on, par for the course of many on the island of Sodor. Jock has appeared only in the Railway series, unfortunately, never having made the jump to TV. He appeared in his debut book, Jock the New Engine, in 1990, and later had a non-speaking appearance in Wilbert the Forest Engine in 1994, which was his last appearance. Hey everyone, editing DJ here. Found out that Wilbert the Forest Engine was not Jock's last appearance. Whatever these magazine stories are, that would have been his last appearance. I found these images on the wiki, with no information attached, so if anyone could explain to me what these stories are, that would be great. He does, however, live on in real life in 2 different places, so let's dive into his basis, shall we? Jock is based on the Ravenglass and Eskdale Railway 15-inch minimum gauge locomotive Northern Rock, a 262 steam locomotive built for the railway in 1976. In the early 1970s, passenger traffic had increased at the Ravenglass and Eskdale, and it was decided that a new engine was needed. In order to determine what sort of engine they were looking for, the railway trialed number 2, Northern Chief, a 462 locomotive from the Romney, Hythe, and Dymechurch Railway. After the trials, the railway decided a 262 narrow-gauge outline design that would match the profile of new closed saloon cars debuting on the railway at the same time these decisions were being made would be best. Much like Jock in the Railway series, it would also be decided that design features of existing locomotives would be incorporated into Northern Rock. The The locomotive was built on-site at the railway's workshop in Ravenglass. Originally, the plan was to name the locomotive Sir Arthur Heywood. However, the Northern Rock Building Society provided funding to the project, and thus it was decided to change the name to Northern Rock in honor of their contributions to the project. Northern Rock entered service in 1976 as part of the railway's 100th anniversary celebration of its opening to passengers, and the engine serves as the railway's flagship locomotive to this day. Northern Rock has traveled quite a bit in its life. It visited the 1990 Gateshed Garden Festival Railway, the Blue Valley Railway, and it even visited Dresden, Germany to promote the railway in 1998. What's even more fascinating is that Northern Rock actually has two identical siblings who live in Japan at the Shu-Zen-ji Romney Railway, a railway based on the Romney, Hythe, and Dymchurch Railway. Both locomotives were built at the Ravenglass Works, Northern Rock 2 in 1989, and Cumbria in 1992. A very cool history for a very cool miniature locomotive. Okay, so here we have the 2004 Ertl Jock, which, if you know your diecast Thomas history, you know that this is quite the model. So the story behind this guy is that Jock was the last new model made for the Ertl line before its discontinuation in 2004. He was also only released in the UK, making him a relatively rare and sought-after model. I say relatively only because while he does sell for considerably high prices on eBay, for example, there are more than a few listings of the character, some actually in pretty good condition, and a few new in box. At the time of writing this script, I have found 10 listings, in total 13 engines with 3 new in box, which I think is pretty good given I haven't even counted other online stores. All this to say, Jock is definitely a rare piece, but if you have the coin to spare, he is definitely obtainable. Nothing like the ridiculous white-faced troublesome truck or whatever. Onto the actual model though, it is absolutely stunning. Ertl really had it going with this one. The detail on the mold is absolutely amazing. All the little details like his whistle and handrails are here, his molded and painted pistons which are accurate, and his face which looks really nice. I also really like just how accurate his shape is to the book illustrations. It just looks so good. Oh, and paint job, also stellar. But to touch on the one obvious issue, yes, the scaling is way off. He is way too big. Being a miniature engine that dwarfs Oliver and is the same size as Gordon, if not bigger, of course those engines meant to be like 3 times his size. This isn't a massive issue, and if I'm being totally honest, it's an issue that is present with the entire Ertl range, but whatever. Jock is an absolutely awesome model, and if you ever have the opportunity to, I highly recommend adding him to your collection. I'm giving him a 9 out of 10. In conclusion, Jock is an engine who isn't just strong with a cool yellow paint scheme, but one that has a solid arc and is a great addition to the Arlesdale fleet, with a solid piece of merchandise for his fans to collect. Truly a shame we never saw him in the show. Thanks for watching, guys. If you have any suggestions for future characters you would like to see me cover, leave them in the comments. See you all in the next video. Bye, guys!